My name is Victoria, and this day was meant to be the pinnacle of my happiness. The morning air in the seaside town of Carmel by the Sea was drenched in sunshine, the sky a vivid blue, like a perfect blessing for my wedding to Jason, the man I had cherished for 7 long years. The quaint St. Andrew's Church, adorned with white orchids and the soft strains of music, welcomed each guest into a solemn, reverent atmosphere. I stood in a small chamber behind the sanctuary, my fingers nervously adjusting the veil before a large mirror. Natalie, my dearest friend since college, was meticulously smoothing out the final creases in my wedding gown. "You look like a true princess." Natalie beamed, her eyes sparkling with unfeigned joy. I managed a smile, my heart aflutter with a mix of exhilaration and nerves. 7 years of shared love, 7 years of anticipation. And now this moment had finally arrived. I closed my eyes, inhaling deeply the sweet perfume of the flowers, trying to etch every sensation of this second into my memory. Suddenly, a disturbance erupted from the front of the church, violently shattering the dreamlike tranquility. Natalie and I exchanged a concerned glance before she hurried out to investigate. Mere seconds later, she returned, her face ashen. "Victoria," Natalie whispered, her voice taut with an unnerving tension. "It's her." Before I could even form a question, the door flew open. Mrs. Helen Jason's mother stormed into the room, her face flushed crimson with rage. In her hand, she clutched a crumpled handkerchief squeezed so tightly it seemed she could crush the very world within her fist. "Mrs. Helen, what?" I stammered, but she cut me off abruptly. "Thief!" She shrieked, her finger pointing directly at me in the presence of Natalie and my father, who was moments away from walking me down the aisle. "You stole my sapphire ring, the McAllister family heirloom." I froze. The room seemed to instantly turn to ice. Murmurs began to spread from outside as curious guests congregated around the wide-open doorway. I don't understand," I stuttered, my voice cracking under the shock. "I've never even seen that ring." "Don't you dare pretend," Helen hissed, her eyes blazing. "I left it in the dressing room this morning, and now it's vanished. You were the only one who went in there." I turned to my father, who gripped my shoulders tightly. His eyes filled with a mixture of worry and helplessness. Natalie urgently whispered to the wedding coordinator, attempting to quell the rising unease among the onlookers. At that critical moment, Jason appeared, his face etched with tension, his eyes darting between his mother and me. "Victoria?" His voice was low, heavy as lead. "Is it true?" I felt as if I were plummeting into an endless abyss. The man I loved, the man I trusted more than life itself, was questioning me, right there under the judgmental gaze of everyone present. "Jason," I whispered, tears scalding my cheeks. "I swear to you, I didn't do it. I never even touched that ring." But Jason's eyes remained clouded with doubt. He said nothing, merely standing there, his fists clenched tightly at his sides. Helen refused to yield, her shrill voice cutting through the tense atmosphere of the room. "If you have any shred of decency, return it this instant. Otherwise, there will be no wedding." The air felt suffocating, charged, and ready to explode. Every eye was fixed on me, the whispers pricking at my skin like 1,000 invisible needles. Jason finally spoke, his voice chillingly cold and devoid of mercy. "If you took it, Victoria, give it back. Otherwise, I can't go through with this." I clutched my chest, a desperate attempt to keep my heart from shattering into a million pieces. The dreams of a future we were supposed to build together, the months spent meticulously planning this very day, all of it disintegrated in that single brutal instant. I looked directly into Jason's eyes, the eyes that had once held all my love and adoration. "If you can't believe me today," I whispered, each word slicing through the oppressive silence, "then we shouldn't get married." Without waiting for his reaction, I gripped my father's arm tightly and turned away, leaving behind Jason's choked, desperate call of my name, the shocked stares of the guests, and the searing, unbearable pain that was tearing through my soul. Outside, the sun continued to blaze with an indifferent brilliance, but within me there was only a frozen, desolate void. I rushed out of the church, my father's hand gripping mine, a steady anchor, trying to keep me from collapsing under the crushing weight of all those staring eyes. Each step on the cold stone pathway felt like a knife twisting in my heart. My pristine white wedding dress swept along the dusty road, dragging the shattered fragments of my dream behind it. Natalie ran beside me, breathless. "Victoria, wait." "I called a car," she whispered, glancing nervously at the assembling crowd as if my ruined wedding had become the town's latest public spectacle. I couldn't hear anything clearly anymore. Every whisper, every stare cut deeper into me like invisible blades. Jason didn't follow. There were no explanations, no attempt to fight for me, for us. In the moment I needed him most, he had chosen silence. The car Natalie had summoned pulled up to the church steps. My father opened the door, his hand never leaving my shoulder, a comforting pressure. "Let's go, sweetheart," he said, his voice remarkably steady, like the last unbroken pillar in the aftermath of a violent storm. I climbed into the car, my wedding dress tangling around my feet, my soul torn to shreds. Natalie got in beside me, her gaze nervously darting out the window as if half expecting Jason to suddenly appear. But he didn't. All that remained were Helen's furious face and the curious, unblinking stares of the crowd. The car sped off, moving through the bright California sunshine, but inside me, everything was muted grey and cold. I leaned my head against the cool glass of the window, allowing the tears to stream unchecked down my burning cheeks. "Should we go to my place?" Natalie asked softly. I nodded weakly. I couldn't bear the thought of going back to my apartment. Every corner was saturated with memories of Jason. Every photograph, every small decorative item would scream accusations of betrayal at me. The car pulled up in front of Natalie's cozy little hillside house, the same sanctuary where we used to gather during our college days. My father got out first, opening the door for me with a tender care, as if I were still his little girl on her way to a birthday party. I stepped into the house, feeling hollowed out, utterly empty. Natalie wrapped me into soft towel, then silently began to make tea, while my father stepped outside to call my mother and deliver the devastating news. I curled up on the sofa, my crumpled wedding dress clinging to my cold body like a shroud. Everything had happened so quickly, so cruelly. Just an hour ago, I had been a bride, moments away from walking down the aisle hand in hand with the man I trusted above all others. Now I was left with nothing but trembling hands and a heart shattered beyond repair. Natalie sat down beside me, silently, offering me a cup of hot tea. I clutched it like a lifeline, allowing the warmth to seep into my chilled skin, a small reminder that I was still here, even if my world had completely collapsed around me. "I'm so sorry, Vic," she whispered, her own eyes red with unshed tears. "I know you would never do something like that." I let out a dry, humorless laugh that echoed strangely in the quiet room. "It doesn't matter anymore, does it?" I said, my voice sounding distant, as if it belonged to someone else entirely. The one person who needed to believe in me the most didn't. Outside the window, the sunlight sparkled on the distant water, a beautiful, indifferent scene. But to me, everything was just a cold, empty void. I took a sip of tea, the bitter taste spreading across my tongue, a harsh reminder that some wounds couldn't be washed away by a single night of tears. The ringing of the phone made me jump. Natalie glanced at the screen, then turned to me. "It's Jason?" she said cautiously. I froze. A part of me desperately wanted to snatch the phone to scream at him to demand why he would believe a lie over my truth. But another part, the weary, wounded part, just wanted to let it all go. "Don't answer," I said, my voice hoarse as I shook my head. "I don't want to hear any excuses." Natalie silenced the phone and placed it face down on the table. The air in the room was heavy, almost palpably, so, as if it were about to shatter. I sat there, still in my torn wedding dress, bathed in the slanted beams of light filtering through the window, and I knew with a chilling certainty that from this moment forward everything had irrevocably changed. No more Jason, no more fairy tale dreams. We sat in the quiet corner of a small seaside cafe, the warm, dim lighting, doing little to soothe the tempest raging within me. Natalie sat across from me, squeezing my hand intermittently, a silent reminder that I wasn't alone in this ordeal. My father stood near the doorway, his eyes sharp and watchful, like an old warrior fiercely guarding the last shreds of our family's dignity. I hadn't even taken a sip of my tea when the door swung open. Jason stepped in, his face gaunt, his eyes bloodshot and underscored by a lack of sleep. His gaze swept across the cafe, finally landing on me. "Victoria," he called out softly, quickly, making his way over to our table. I gripped my teacup tighter, feeling a coldness seep deep into my bones. Jason pulled out a chair and sat down. There was only a small table separating us, but it felt like an insurmountable ocean. He swallowed hard, his eyes flickering with a mixture of guilt and confusion. "I just want to hear you say it one more time." I looked straight at him, my heart numb, devoid of feeling. "What exactly do you want to hear, Jason?" I asked, my voice no longer trembling like it had the previous night, but now cold and unnervingly calm. "Just admit it," Jason whispered, his head bowed. "Just say you took the ring in a moment of weakness and I'll forgive you. We can put all of this behind us. We can still have our wedding." I let out a laugh so sharp and brittle it seemed to silence the entire cafe. "You want me to confess?" I repeated, each word slicing through the suffocating air. "Just so it'll be easier for you to forgive me." Jason didn't answer. His hands clenched into tight fists on the tabletop. I looked at him, truly looked at him. The man who had once meant everything to me, now appearing so small, so weak, so heartbreakingly cowardly. "No," I said firmly, my voice resolute. "I didn't do it, and I will not lower myself to confess to a crime I didn't commit just to soothe your own weakness." Jason's eyes darkened, and in an instant I saw a flash of anger ignite within him. He shot up from his chair, leaning in close, his voice a low, menacing growl. "Who do you think you are? If it wasn't you, then who else could it have been?" The words hit me with the force of a slap. My blood boiled, and without thinking I swung my hand and slapped him hard across the face. The sound cracked through the heavy, charged air. Jason stumbled back a step, his face flushing with a mixture of shock and profound rage. Guests turned their heads, their whispers filling the silence. In a split second, everything spun wildly out of control. Jason lunged toward me, his eyes blazing with a fury I had never witnessed in him before. Before I could react, a sharp exploding pain erupted on my left cheek. His hand had struck me hard enough to make me stagger backward, nearly sending me tumbling off my chair. My father immediately rushed over forcefully, shoving Jason back, his voice a deep guttural growl. "What in God's name do you think you're doing?" Jason struggled, but my father held him firmly, his eyes blazing with a protective fury, as if he were ready to tear the world apart to shield me. Natalie rushed to my side, steadying me as I clutched my burning cheek. A wave of dizziness washing over me. The cafe manager hurried over loudly and firmly ordering Jason to leave the premises. A few customers stood up, pointing and whispering, their faces etched with shock, as if they had just witnessed a horrific disaster unfold before their very eyes. Jason wrenched his arm free from my father's grasp, his face falling, but it was far too late. No one was interested in hearing any excuses he might offer. I stood up, tasting the metallic tang of salt at the corner of my lips. Under the soft yellow lights of the cafe, I could see the burning redness already blooming on my cheek. Natalie gently grasped my shoulder and whispered, Let's go, Victoria. I nodded without a moment's hesitation. We walked out, my father staying close by a strong, unwavering shield between me and the curious prying stares of the other patrons. I didn't look back. I didn't need to know whether Jason was standing there, looking regretful or cold and indifferent. Because from the moment his hand had struck my face, everything between us was definitively, irrevocably over. Outside, the ocean winds whipped my silk scarf from my shoulders. I pulled it tighter around me, trying to conceal the angry red mark on my cheek. But I couldn't hide the deeper gnawing pain that was eating away at me from the inside. Natalie gently took my arm. "Want me to call the police?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. I looked at her, then at my father. Both were waiting silently, empowering me to make the decision. I took a deep, steadying breath. "No," I said quietly. "Not now. I just want to go home." My father nodded and flagged down a nearby taxi. As the car sped away, leaving the little cafe and the fresh, raw scars behind, I made a solemn promise to myself. This would not define my life. I sat silently in this living room at Natalie's house, the soft yellow lamplight casting a blurry, comforting glow on the cream-coloured walls. The cold compress Natalie had given me had long since lost its chill, but the throbbing pain on my cheek remained, a constant, unerasable reminder of the day's brutality. Outside, the ocean winds howled with increasing ferocity, the crashing waves sounding as if they were pounding directly against the raw, open wounds inside me. I pulled the thick blanket tighter around myself. My eyes dry, but my heart completely worn out and desolate. I had cried all the way home, cried until there were no tears left to shed. Now only a heavy, suffocating emptiness pressed against my chest. Natalie sat nearby, holding an open book. She wasn't actually reading, simply staying close, a silent guardian ensuring I wouldn't feel entirely alone during this seemingly endless night. I closed my eyes, allowing the memories to flood back Jason. His accusing eyes, the sting of the slap, the crushing weight of betrayal. It all played on a relentless loop like a broken film I couldn't shut off. A part of me still couldn't believe it had really happened, that my 7-year love story had culminated in such a cruel and devastating end. It was 3 o'clock in the morning when I finally drifted off into a restless, fitful sleep, haunted by shattered dreams. I dreamt I was standing alone in a deserted church, wearing my torn and soiled wedding dress, calling out into the emptiness. But no one ever came back for me. When I woke up, the faint grey morning light was seeping through the curtains. My head felt as heavy as lead, my body aching as if I had endured a brutal physical battle. I stepped out into the kitchen and saw Natalie already preparing breakfast, her face still etched with lines of worry. "Good morning," she said softly, her voice as fragile as spun glass. I tried to smile back, a pale, unfamiliar imitation of a smile. I sat at the table, mindlessly spinning the glass of orange juice between my hands. My phone lay silently on the table. I knew I would have to face it eventually. I picked it up and turned it on. Immediately the screen lit up with a barrage of missed calls and messages. Jason's name was right at the top, each letter cutting a fresh wound across my already bruised heart. I took a deep breath and opened his message. "Victoria, I'm sorry. Please give me a chance to explain. I shouldn't have done that. I was wrong. Please, Victoria." Another message followed immediately. "I'll wait, as long as it takes. Just hear me out once." I clutched the phone, the old familiar pain flaring up with renewed intensity. For a fleeting second, the soft-hearted, vulnerable part of me almost wanted to believe him, to entertain the possibility of going back to a time before everything had shattered into a million irreparable pieces. But reason, cold and hard, pulled me back just in time. I remembered Jason's eyes when he had doubted me, when he had relentlessly pushed me to confess to something I never did, and most vividly I remembered the slap. A slap not just to my face, but to the very foundation of everything we had built together. "Are you okay?" Natalie asked. Her eyes filled with genuine concern. I set the phone down as if it were something contaminated, something I didn't want to touch ever again. "I'm okay," I said, my voice raspy but firm with newfound resolve. "And I'm not going back." Natalie nodded gently, a visible wave of relief washing over her as if a heavy weight had been lifted from her own chest. I knew this decision would mean facing lonely days ahead, enduring awkward questions from friends and family, and the endless insidious whispers of gossip. But I also knew, with an unshakable certainty, that forgiving Jason wouldn't be an act of salvation. It would only prolong the agony and bury my dignity even deeper. I picked up the phone and dialed Jason's number. After a few rings, he answered, his voice rushed and anxious. "Victoria." "Yes, Victoria, please just let me meet you. Explain." I cut him off, my voice, calm, almost chilling, in its composure. "There's no need, Jason." "Vita." "Jason." I interrupted, my voice clearer this time, each word deliberately carving out the irreparable space between us. There will be no second chances. Not now. Not ever. I hung up before he could utter another word. A profound wave of relief washed over me, even though my hands were still trembling from the confrontation. I turned to Natalie. She smiled warmly, an expression of immense pride radiating from her face. Yesterday I was the abandoned bride, but today I was the woman who had chosen herself. 2 days later, just when I thought a fragile sense of calm might finally be settling over my shattered life, another message from Jason appeared on my phone screen. "Victoria, please give me a chance. There's something you need to know. Meet me at Beacon Cafe 10 a.m. tomorrow. If you don't come, I'll understand." I stared at the message, my emotions torn. Part of me wanted to delete it instantly and move on to pretend as if the past 7 years had never existed. But another part, the part that still desperately craved the truth, the full picture wouldn't allow me to ignore it so easily. The next morning, with the early sunlight filtering through the clouds like thin silk, I walked into Beacon Cafe, my heart heavy with apprehension. Natalie had insisted on accompanying me, but I had gently refused. This conversation, this final act of closure, I needed to face it myself. Jason was already there, looking noticeably thinner, his faded blue shirt wrinkled and uncared for. When he saw me, he immediately stood up, a nervous energy radiating from him. I didn't offer a greeting. I just coldly pulled out a chair and sat down, creating a deliberate distance between us. "Say what you need to say," I stated, my voice devoid of emotion, flat and dry. Jason swallowed hard, his eyes darting away for a moment before he finally took a deep, steadying breath. "Victoria, the ring. My mother found it." I frowned, a knot forming in my stomach. "Found it?" Jason nodded, his voice hoarse with unshed emotion. "She accidentally left it in her nightstand drawer. She didn't even remember putting it there." A chill ran down my spine, cold and sharp. "So?" I clenched my hands tightly in my lap, to stop them from shaking visibly. "All the accusations that day, they were baseless." Jason lowered his head, unable to meet my gaze. I had a huge fight with my mom after finding out. I cut ties with them. I moved out." I laughed, a cold, hollow sound that seemed to echo the emptiness within me. "Moved out. Cut ties after everything. You think that's enough to undo the damage?" Jason looked up, and his eyes pleading desperate. "I know saying sorry isn't enough. I just want you to know that you were innocent. I was a fool, an absolute fool for not believing you." I looked at him. Then the man who had once been my entire world, now reduced to a stranger, consumed by regret and self-reproach. "Jason." I said, my voice as calm and still as a deep lake. "You didn't just not believe me. You actively chose to side with the person who humiliated and falsely accused me. You allowed doubt, your own and hers, to destroy everything we had painstakingly built over 7 years. He reached out, attempting to take my hand, but I instinctively pulled it back, the coldness spreading further through me, extinguishing any lingering embers of warmth. "I regret it," Jason whispered, his voice shaking with the force of his emotions. "I lost you, didn't I?" I looked him straight in the eyes, my gaze unwavering. "You did." There were no tears this time, no more begging or pleading. Only the cold, hard, and inevitable end of a relationship that had rotted from its very roots. Jason bowed his head again, his hands clenched tightly together on the table, as if he were desperately searching for a salvation that he knew would never come again. I stood up, feeling as light and unburdened as an early autumn breeze. "I wish you happiness, Jason." I said the words devoid of bitterness, signifying a true letting go. As I turned and walked out of the cafe, the morning sunlight poured onto the steps, golden and warm, almost like a benediction. For the first time after all those dark, agonizing days, I lifted my head high, filling my lungs with the fresh, clean air, feeling my heartbeat steady and strong once more. That afternoon, I returned to my apartment, carrying a strange, conflicting mixture of residual pain and burgeoning relief. The incessant phone calls had stopped. The haunting pleas for forgiveness were no more. It was just me standing in the familiar room where every corner, every object was imbued with memories of Jason. I stood in the middle of the living room, sunlight slanting through the large windows, casting a poignant glow over the sofa where we used to laugh together, sharing dreams and secrets. My fingers brushed against the framed photographs on the wall, each one seeming to whisper a silent question. "Why are you still holding on to the past?" I walked over to the desk where the wedding calendar meticulously detailed honeymoon plans, and the guest list still sat untouched monuments to a future that would never be. A sharp stabbing ache pierced through me as I read the neatly written words, "Victoria and Jason's big day." With a sudden decisive movement, I closed the planner, tore it into tiny, insignificant pieces, and let the scraps of paper fall like bitter snowflakes across the living room floor. That night, I sat in front of my computer, the cold blue glow of the screen reflecting off my still bruised left cheek. I opened my email and began typing a request for an extended leave of absence from my job. My fingers moved across the keys with a newfound firmness, devoid of hesitation. "Dear HR Director, I am requesting a 6-month leave of absence to recover my mental and physical health. I hope the company will understand my situation, and I am committed to ensuring a thorough handover of all my current responsibilities. Sincerely, Victoria Hart." I hit send. A complete, pure silence enveloped me afterward, a silence that felt both empty and liberating. There was nothing tying me to my old life anymore. I sat there for a long moment, allowing myself to truly feel the emptiness, to acknowledge the void. Then suddenly, an image flashed in my mind. A pristine, sun-drenched beach, emerald waters lapping gently at the shore. Palm trees swaying gracefully in a warm breeze. I wasn't sure where the memory, or perhaps the vision, came from. Maybe a postcard someone had once sent me, or a fleeting image from a travel magazine. Seychelles. The name itself sounded like a soft, alluring invitation from another world, a world far removed from my current pain. I opened my browser and searched for images of Seychelles. Each photograph that appeared on the screen lit a quiet, hopeful fire inside me. Endless blue skies, vast stretches of powdery white sand, winding paths disappearing into untouched verdant forests. Without overthinking it, without allowing doubt to creep in, I booked a flight. One way, no return date specified. The next morning, after my leave request was surprisingly quickly approved, I started packing. I didn't need much, just a few comfortable clothes, a blank journal waiting to be filled, and an old camera I had never really gotten the chance to use properly. Natalie came over to help me pack. When she saw the e-ticket lying on the kitchen counter, her eyes widened in surprise. "Are you sure about this, Victoria?" she asked, a hint of concern in her voice. I nodded, a real smile, the first genuine smile in weeks, gracing my lips. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Natalie hugged me tightly, squeezing a little harder than usual, as if trying to infuse her own strength and courage into me. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. The night before my flight, I stood alone on the balcony of my apartment, a cup of warm mint tea cradled in my hands. The city lights twinkled below a familiar panorama of life moving on as it always does, while I was preparing to step into a brand new, entirely unknown chapter. Part of me was undeniably afraid, leaving everything familiar behind, venturing alone into a foreign land with no concrete plans. But the bigger part, the stronger, more resilient part of me craved to live authentically, to be true to myself, with a fierceness that was impossible to resist. The next morning at the airport, I stood waiting with my small, unassuming suitcase. No Jason, no shattered dreams weighing me down. Only me, and a future yet to be written, a blank page waiting for my story. As the plane lifted off the runway, I looked out the window, watching the familiar cityscape of my old life fade into a misty, indistinct blur below. I closed my eyes and whispered a silent promise to myself, a vow for this new beginning. From this day onward, I will no longer live to meet anyone else's expectations. I will no longer force myself to be the perfect girl in anyone else's eyes. The plane touched down at Seychelles International Airport, under the brilliant welcoming light of a late afternoon sun. As I stepped out of the terminal, warm ocean breezes caressed my face, carrying the intoxicating scent of salt and exotic tropical flowers. Everything felt wonderfully foreign, completely liberating, and that was precisely why, for the first time in a very long time, I felt truly alive. I rented a small, charming bungalow nestled among swaying palm trees on Maho Island, far from the crowded, bustling tourist areas. Every morning I woke to the soothing rhythm of the waves and the cheerful serenade of birdsong emanating from the dense surrounding trees, as if nature itself were gently trying to heal the aching wound still tender in my heart. In those first few precious days, I wandered endlessly along the vast stretches of white sand, letting my bare feet sink into the velvet-soft beach, feeling the earth beneath me. I carried the old camera, a forgotten birthday gift from my mother, and began capturing everything that caught my eye, every small detail of this new world. Tiny crabs darting shyly into the sand, emerald waves crashing dramatically against the ancient rocks, sunsets setting the entire sky ablaze with fiery colour. These became my subjects, my focus. One afternoon, as I sat on the beach attempting to capture the precise moment the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sea with molten gold, I met Luke. He was intensely focused on adjusting the lens of a professional-grade camera, trying to catch the tiniest, most subtle movement of the waves. Seeing me struggling with my rather rudimentary old camera, Luke smiled warmly and walked over. "Your focus is a little off," he said, his voice carrying a thick, friendly American accent, his eyes sparkling with an easygoing friendliness that immediately put me at ease. I blushed, a bit embarrassed by his blunt but well-intentioned honesty, yet I couldn't help but laugh at the undeniable sincerity in his gaze. Luke sat down beside me on the sand, patiently showing me how to properly adjust the lens, how to catch the light naturally, how to frame a shot for maximum impact. From that chance meeting, a comfortable friendship began to blossom between us. Luke, about 5 years my senior, was a freelance photographer who spent most of his life traveling the globe, capturing vibrant memories and breathtaking landscapes through his powerful photos. He told me captivating stories about trekking across the rugged terrain of Patagonia, sleeping in tents under the vast starry skies of the Sahara Desert, and exploring remote hidden corners of South Asia that few ever saw. Listening to him speak, I began to see a world far bigger, far more expansive than my own personal pain. A world where individual heartbreak, no matter how profound, seemed so small and insignificant when compared to the sheer grandeur and majesty of nature. With Luke as my informal guide, I learned to see the world through a new lens, not one coloured by hurt and betrayal, but one focused on the simple, honest, and often overlooked details of everyday life. We spent countless hours on the beach, exploring colourful local markets brimming with exotic sights and sounds, or wandering through tiny, picturesque villages that most tourists never found their way to. Luke patiently taught me the art of capturing a fleeting moment, the skill of listening to the silent stories hidden within each smolny, each shared glance, each ray of light. One night, while we sat on the deck of a small boat, staring up at the diamond-scattered canvas of the night sky, half-finished, coconut drinks resting beside us, Luke turned to me, his expression thoughtful and serious. "Victoria," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "Have you ever thought about making photography something bigger? A real journey, a true calling, not just a casual hobby?" I laughed, shaking my head in self-deprecation. I never thought I was good enough for something that big, that serious. Luke smiled, his blue eyes steady with an unwavering certainty that surprised me. "You have an eye for it, Victoria. Something you can't teach, technique that can be learned, but feeling true artistic sensibility, that's a gift." His words planted a small, steady flame of possibility inside me, a flame that began to grow with each passing day. A week later, while we were editing photos at a small, sun-drenched seaside cafe, Luke suddenly made a suggestion that would change the course of my life once again. "I have a friend," he began, "who runs a dive center in southern Thailand. He's looking for someone to handle their communications, and more importantly, to capture their activities through compelling photos and videos. Would you want to give it a try?" I froze the proposal hanging in the air. The idea of moving to yet another new country, taking on an entirely new and challenging job, working in an unpredictable and dynamic environment. It all sounded like a crazy, exhilarating adventure, the kind the old Victoria, the cautious and fearful Victoria, would have never even dared to imagine in her wildest dreams. But now, after everything I had been through, after staring into the abyss and finding my way back, I knew with a profound certainty that I wasn't that scared, timid girl anymore. I looked at Luke, his patient eyes offering not pressure, but quiet, unwavering support and adoration. I pressed my lips together, my heart pounding in my chest with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. "I'll need a night to think about it." I whispered the words barely audible above the gentle lapping of the waves. Luke simply nodded a warm, understanding smile gracing his lips. "Whatever you choose, Victoria, I believe you'll find your own path, the one that's right for you." That night, I sat alone on the bungalow's balcony under a vast inky sky scattered with what seemed like millions of diamond-like stars. The ocean breeze whispered secrets through the palm trees, soft and full of unspoken promise. And in that moment of quiet contemplation, I knew. A new chapter, an even bolder adventure was waiting for me just ahead. A month later, I landed at Phuket Airport under the bright azure skies of southern Thailand. The unfamiliar, intoxicating scent of tropical air mingled with the lively melodic chatter emanating from the colourful stalls made me feel as if I had stepped into an entirely new and vibrant world. Mark, the friend Luke had mentioned, greeted me right at the airport exit. He was an American in his 40s, tanned and rugged from years spent in the sun and sea, and he possessed an ever-present warm smile. "Welcome to the land where shoes are optional," Mark joked good-naturedly as he helped lift my suitcase onto the back of an old, slightly battered pickup truck. I laughed the first truly natural, unforced laugh in weeks, a laugh that needed no effort at all. We drove to the dive centre, a charming rustic building nestled by Katanoy Beach, hidden among a grove of lush, verdant coconut trees. The sea gently lapped at the golden sand just a few steps away from its entrance. My room was simple, unpretentious. A bamboo bed, a small wooden desk by the window, and a ceiling fan humming a lazy rhythm overhead. But when I flung the window open wide and let the fresh ocean breeze rush in, carrying the scent of freedom, I knew deep in my soul that I didn't need anything more. My work began the very next day. In the mornings, I managed dive registrations, diligently checked emails, and replied to customer messages and inquiries. In the afternoons, I followed the dive groups out to sea, my camera always in hand, ready to capture the magical, ethereal moments unfolding beneath the ocean's shimmering surface. At first, I was undeniably clumsy. The waves were stronger and more unpredictable than I had anticipated, and the sun here was so fiercely intense that just one missed application of sunscreen would leave my skin an angry lobster red. But Mark and the entire dive center team were incredibly patient and supportive, encouraging me every single step of the way, celebrating my small victories and helping me learn from my mistakes. I gradually got used to waking up with the sunrise, walking barefoot across the cool, wet sand to the edge of the sea, breathing in the salty, invigorating air that felt like life itself. I grew familiar with the amusing challenge of mixing English with a few broken Thai words I was diligently learning from my local colleagues. And more than anything, I got used to the profound, exhilarating feeling of truly living without the heavy shadow of the past constantly weighing me down, without the ghosts of yesterday dictating my present. The camera became my closest, most trusted companion. I captured everything that caught my eye and stirred my soul divers, waving joyfully beneath the deep blue water, vibrant schools of fish gliding gracefully over intricate coral reefs. The bright, awe-struck faces of tourists experiencing the wonder of the ocean floor for the very first time. I started posting the photos on the dive center's website and their various social media accounts. Almost immediately, tour bookings soared, and Mark praised my contributions enthusiastically at every team meeting. "Victoria, you're breathing new life into this place," he once said, his eyes full of genuine trust and appreciation. Day by day, week by week, I felt myself becoming an essential, valued part of this close-knit community. No one here cared who I used to be or what I had gone through in my past life. They only saw who I was now, a girl trying her very best every single day to start anew, to build something beautiful from the wreckage of her past. One night after finishing a challenging but rewarding night dive shoot, I sat alone on the worn wooden steps of the dive center, watching the ethereal moonlight dance and shimmer across the calm, dark surface of the sea. I opened my phone and reread the emails from my old company. The formal corporate words, reminding me about the impending deadline to return to my old job after my extended leave of absence. I quietly read them all, absorbing their content, then turned off my phone and left it resting silently on my lap, a decision already forming in my mind. I knew I had a choice to make, a significant crossroads, and surprisingly, I felt no hesitation, no lingering doubt anymore. I didn't want to go back. No more cold, sterile office rooms, no more dull, soul-crushing meetings, no more pitying, condescending looks I would inevitably have to endure from former colleagues. No more familiar streets that would only serve as painful reminders of broken dreams and a shattered heart. Here, in this vibrant, welcoming land, I had discovered a different part of myself, a stronger, more resilient self, a self that thrived in a life where every day began with the soothing sound of waves and ended with the breathtaking spectacle of a blazing sunset at the distant horizon. I stood up the wet sand, clinging coolly to my bare feet, and looked up at the vast, star-filled sky, feeling a sense of peace and clarity I hadn't known in years. Tomorrow, I would write my official resignation email. The next morning, before the sun had fully pierced the light sea mist that often blanketed the coast, I sat at the small wooden desk in my room. my fingers poised expectantly above the keyboard. The old company's email still glowed on the screen, a silent final reminder of the life I was about to leave behind for good. I typed slowly but firmly, each word deliberate and full of conviction. Dear Management, I am officially notifying you that I will not be returning to work after the conclusion of my current leave of absence. Thank you for the opportunities provided to me during my tenure. I have now found a new direction for my life and career. Wishing the company continued success. Sincerely, Victoria Hart.
Miss Aldredy.
With no hesitation, no lingering regrets, I hit send and quietly closed that chapter of my life forever. Outside my window, the ocean waves kept rolling onto the shore, steady, calm, and rhythmic, just like my heart, which was slowly but surely rediscovering its own natural, peaceful rhythm. From that day forward, I began to truly build a new life for myself on this faraway, welcoming land. I immediately signed up for a basic Thai language course at a small community centre located about a 10-minute walk from the dive centre. The first few classes were filled with laughter as I stumbled comically through the pronunciations of Kob Kun Ka, thank you, and Sawasdee Ka, hello. Our teacher, a kind and patient man named Chai, diligently corrected every small mistake, encouraging me gently, step by step, on my linguistic journey. At first, the Thai language sounded like an impenetrable maze of strange, unfamiliar tones and inflections. But little by little, with persistence and practice, I began to hear its soft, melodic rhythm, to appreciate its nuances, and to see the genuine warmth reflected in the way the local people smiled and spoke to one another and to me. During the day, I continued my fulfilling work at the dive centre, checking tour schedules, assisting guests with their needs, and of course, taking countless photographs that captured the beauty and excitement of their underwater adventures. At night, I buried myself in books practicing simple sentences and phrases so that I could communicate more directly and meaningfully with the local people in their own language, fostering a deeper connection with the community that had embraced me. Photography, which had once been a small, almost forgotten hobby, grew into a deep, all-consuming passion. I didn't just capture underwater moments anymore. I sought out the quiet charm of traditional fishing villages, the vibrant chaos of bustling night markets, the hidden beauty of quiet alleys where children laughed freely under the dim, flickering lights. Every photograph I took felt like more than just a beautiful image. It was a slice of life, raw, vibrant, authentic, and real. Mark, who had seen a spark of potential in me from the very beginning, encouraged me to organize a small photography exhibition at the dive center, a showcase of my work. At first, the idea terrified me. The thought of putting my art, my soul on display for others to judge, felt incredibly vulnerable. But with his constant encouragement and the unwavering support of the entire team, I found the courage to do it. The night of the exhibition, my photographs were printed large and hung with care along the dive center hallway, transforming it into a temporary gallery. Tourists, locals, even seasoned, world-weary divers all stopped for long contemplative moments before each frame, their faces reflecting a range of emotions. An Australian tourist, a man with kind eyes, looked at me with a bright, genuine smile. "You've really captured the soul of this place." He said his words simple, but profoundly moving. Those words made my throat tighten with emotion. No glamorous titles, no shiny certificates or awards were needed. Just that simple, heartfelt compliment was enough to let me know with absolute certainty that I was on the right path, the path I was always meant to find. Gradually, I came to realize that true peace didn't come from running away from old memories or trying to bury the past. It came from facing them head-on, acknowledging their impact, overcoming their lingering power, and then meticulously, patiently rebuilding myself from the smallest, most fundamental things. Here, in this gentle land, I lived slower, deeper, more mindfully. I learned to smile at strangers in the market, to appreciate the warmth of a shared unspoken understanding. I learned to be patient while diving all morning, sometimes for hours on end, just for that one perfect fleeting shot. I learned to feel profoundly grateful for each sunrise I witnessed, each glorious sunset that painted the sky with breathtaking colours. One night, sitting by the beach, under the faint ethereal moonlight, I realised with a sense of quiet wonder that I no longer hurt when I thought about the past. Jason Paris, the old days. They were just finished chapters, stories that had reached their conclusion, now resting quietly on the shelf of my memory, no longer wielding the power to wound me. I had moved far beyond what had once broken me, what had once threatened to consume me entirely. And more importantly, I had found something I never dared to believe I deserved, a pure, steady, and unshakable peace from within. One dry seasoned afternoon, as the sunset painted the Katanoy sky in hues of purple and gold, I sat on the wooden steps outside the dive centre, my camera resting lightly on my lap, a familiar and comforting weight. The gentle breeze carried the salty, invigorating scent of the sea, whispering greetings from the land that had embraced me when I was at my most lost, my most broken. I looked out at the horizon, the golden water glowing under the last fading light of the day. In that moment of quiet reflection, I realized I no longer thought of Jason with anger or bitterness. The painful memories of the ruined wedding, the crushing humiliation, the profound heartbreak. They were scars, now reminders of battles fought and survived, but no longer open bleeding wounds. I didn't deny what had happened. The pain had been real, the despair all-consuming. I had fallen. I had despaired. But I also knew, with the clarity that only hindsight can bring, that, if not for that brutal, devastating blow, I might never have found the courage to let go of a life that no longer fit me, a life that was slowly suffocating my true self. If Jason hadn't turned away from me that fateful day, I might still be clinging desperately to a half-lived, unfulfilling life, losing myself further in hollow expectations and the pursuit of someone else's definition of happiness. That pain, in the end, was the violent, unwelcome push that forced me out of the old confining cage. The catalyst that made me confront myself, truly confront myself, and ask the terrifying but ultimately liberating questions. Who am I really? How do I truly want to live my one precious life? Now, sitting under the vast, benevolent Thai sky, I could finally answer those questions with confidence and peace. I am Victoria, a girl, who was once shattered into a million pieces, but who found the strength, resilience, and determination to rebuild her life, piece by painstaking piece, from those very broken fragments. Life here wasn't always easy. It wasn't a perpetual paradise. There were days when big tempestuous waves cancelled all dives' weeks, when business slowed to a crawl and the dive centre struggled financially. But every challenge, every obstacle overcome, only made me tougher, more resourceful, and deepened my profound love and appreciation for the life I had so carefully and intentionally built for myself here. I learned that true lasting happiness wasn't to be found in grand gestures or material possessions. It hid quietly and unassumingly in the small, everyday moments, a cold, refreshing coconut water after a long, hot dive, the joyous, infectious laughter ringing out over the boat when a pod of playful dolphins was spotted frolicking in the waves, the grateful, beaming look from a tourist upon receiving their best, most cherished photo from their trip, a memory I had helped capture. I learned to be thankful for each day. I woke up breathing in the fresh, clean air, doing the work I loved with passion and purpose, living truly and authentically as myself, without performing for anyone, without seeking anyone else's approval. One day, while patiently teaching a local girl the basics of how to hold and operate a camera, sharing the gift that had brought me so much healing, I heard my phone chime with an incoming message. It was a message from Natalie, my steadfast friend, along with a photo she had sent. She was standing in front of her house, back in Carmel by the sea, the familiar backdrop of my old life, holding a simple handwritten sign that read, "We miss you, Vic." I laughed, tears rolling freely down my cheeks. Not tears of sadness, but tears of profound, overwhelming gratitude for being so unconditionally loved, no matter where I was in the world or what life I chose to live. I texted back immediately, my heart full. "I miss you too. But Nat, I'm happy. Truly deeply happy." That night, I added one more line to my travel journal, a culmination of all I had learned and experienced. Thank you to the things that broke. Thank you to the dead-end roads, because it was there at the very end of what I thought was everything that I finally found the path back to myself. As I closed the journal, I knew the journey ahead would still be long, with its own set of challenges and uncertainties. There would still be storms, moments of doubt, times when the old shadows might try to creep back in. But now I possessed enough faith in myself, enough resilience forged in the fires of adversity to keep walking forward without trembling, without questioning my worth or my path. I lifted my head to the vast starry night sky, the same sky that had witnessed my darkest despair and my brightest rebirth. Once again, my heart overflowed with an exhilarating, boundless sense of freedom. Not the fleeting kind of freedom that comes from merely running away from problems, but the deep, enduring freedom to face life head-on, with all its complexities, all its imperfections, all its scars, and all its breathtaking, imperfect beauty. Victoria's story proves that sometimes the losses we believe will irrevocably break us are in fact the crucial turning points that guide us back to our truest selves. From a betrayed bride on what should have been her happiest day, she transformed into a woman who courageously built a new life filled with purpose and passion in a distant land. She healed through sheer perseverance, unwavering self-belief, and the courage to embrace the unknown. She didn't just survive her ordeal. She rediscovered her passion, found an inner peace she never thought possible, and tapped into the pure, unadulterated joy of simply living. She skillfully turned heartbreak into an unshakable strength and transformed what seemed like an abject failure into a remarkable second chance at a life lived on her own terms. What do you think about Victoria's inspiring journey of resilience and self-discovery? Share your thoughts and reflections in the comments below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful and meaningful stories about family life, personal growth, and the incredible strength of the human spirit.